Okay, questions on this set. Q on the create diagram. Kirby?
I would really like to know if there was a for-list interview involved.
In that?
Yeah, was it just your boss saying, here's our design goal?
No.
What was your design goal for that?
Well, the design goal was, there was a KPI, a key performance indicator of how many people share the content in here. And one of my questions is like, well, if the content sucks and they don't share it, how's that my fault? But that's another conversation. Also, pushing responsibilities onto other people doesn't usually get you too far in people's good graces. But anyway, so one of the things that I did actually, I went to so I did do some learning there before making it. Aside from talking to my engineer, which was to go to doctors' offices and watch, I was like, where are there celebrity magazines where people are already consuming this content? I went to a doctor's office, and then I also went to a nail salon, and there were, people like showing, like they would lean over and show something to someone, and they would be like, they're like, oh, look what just happened. And so that was kind of the idea there, was that there is already this kind of like quick share kind of gossipy thing going on inside there. Okay. Any other questions on this one?
So do you have like a prototyping tool you would recommend for like micro interactions? So like you can show that kind of interaction to the developer, and also like how you communicate to them, like that's exactly what I want.
Yes. So that's a great way, you phrased it really nicely, which is if the point of the prototype is to communicate something to a developer, it might not need to be interactive. You could just make a movie out of it. And there's a great tool that I like called Principle, P-R-I-N-C-I-P-L-E, Principle, that is good at doing both interactive and movie stuff. And so the way that I've done that before, where I want to show, and there's also another one called Hype, H-Y-P-E, and that outputs HTML. And back when, if you just spin up a GitHub page and then put it up there, you can have an interactive prototype deployable to anyone, and that's a pretty good tool as well. That one's timeline based, right? So everything has to be linear, right? If you've ever worked in like anybody Macromedia Flash days, yeah, all right. So timeline based things can have parts nested within them to trigger other timelines, but for the most part, you have a fairly linear set of interactions that might come out. You could spend a lot of time prototyping if you're using those. Principle's nice because it's not time. I mean, there are timeline aspects to it, but it's mostly state-based. I even use Keynote to do some of these animations where, if this is slide 1, and this is, here's state 1, state 2, object 1, and then you change the parameters of this object to be like square, but it's still object 1. What Principle does is basically just it does a tween, or like it animates those properties smoothly over time. And you can get into the timeline to say like, oh, change the shadow faster than you change the shape, or something like that. And so I like Principle quite a bit for that. Yeah. But to follow up, and I wouldn't be a good teacher if I didn't do this, so your homework is, there's an article by a woman named Stephanie Houde, H-O-U-D-E, called What Do Prototypes Prototype? And that article basically gets you to answer, how deep do I need to make this prototype? How much do I need to put in there? Do I need to connect it to data? Do I need it to be visually like perfect? Does it just need to be wireframes? And for some of those, when you convey something to an engineer that you're working with, you might not need to go full out with like the most pixel perfect prototype. And knowing when to not spend too much time on something is an incredible skill set.
Can you repeat the name of the article again?
What do prototypes prototype?
Thank you.
Yes. Okay, any other questions on that create action funnel or prototyping? Okay. One last word on prototyping because I know Kirby went through this, and usability testing. Prototyping a game versus a interaction like in UI, those are very, very different. It feels to me that you cannot prototype a game without there being some fun aspect to it. And so what do prototypes prototype? You're prototyping some fun. And you've got to, actually, you know, there's this one, you know, people say gamification is a 4-letter word and they don't like using that, you know, technique in UI or in products that aren't games. But like the best thing I ever heard about that was if it's fun, and it'll be, you know if it's not fun. If something is, it's not, what was it? There was some Texas judge that made some ruling about pornography, and his like literal language in it was, you know it when you see it. And that is like, that's on the books somewhere. And that's fun too. It's not like, well, it's kind of fun. No, that's not fun. If it's kind of fun, it's not fun. And so a prototype of a game needs to actually prototype a little bit of fun, or a little bit of learning, or something like that, depending on what the game does. And that's been a really big problem for me as well in working for media companies, where people don't come to National Geographic or Wall Street Journal or whatever to play around with the UI. They go there to read something or look at something, and so you have to include live content and real content in there to really get the person in the headspace that you need them to be to evaluate that UI properly in a usability test. Okay. Last diagram, and then we'll get into some more questions. Ooh, I got a bonus diagram too. Okay. Bonus diagram, and then the last diagram. Okay, this one I really like, and this ties what we were just talking about very nicely. So this over here is, let's see, how does it go? Yeah. This is cost to change your mind. And a project at the very, very, very beginning I could have 5 ideas right now. It doesn't cost me anything to change my mind about what I want to do. But once I started making it and I ship it, and if this is ship, right, you know, put the idea out there in the world, once it's out there, it couldn't be any more costly to change it, because you've spent all whatever it requires to put it out there. And so you can't even change your mind really anymore there. Now this one is what is that one again? That one is cost to change your mind. What was this bonus diagram? I think this is just time to...
Time to research a little bit?
No. I think the takeaway is this. It's test early and often. And then I think that this one is like, what is it? Number of design options. Number of design options. So at the beginning, the world's your oyster. Once you ship it, that's the thing that you shipped. You have the one design option that you put out there. Obviously, you can iterate on things and send them back out there, but if, you know, from concept to shipping, the number of design options you have dwindles by the time you've shipped your one design option, and the cost to change it just gets exponentially larger. Okay, so that's your bonus diagram, and basically the takeaway is test early and often. Okay, last diagram, and it's, I'm going to do it in a couple different parts. Okay. What is this? Anyone want to tell me what you see here? Engineers? What is it?
Correlation.
Well, there is a correlation, yes, between these two things. I'll call this is it is a key correlation. Anyone? No?
many-to-many relationship?
Yeah, it's a database. It's a database that's showing some sort of key relationship between something. So in this particular one is many-to-many versus many-to-one or one-to-many. So right now there is one. Well, there's two of us, isn't there? So Kirby will be speaking, and James spoke, and okay, so that's many-to-many speakers to audience members in this particular situation. But my social security number is mine alone, and that's my unique identifier. And the database model right here, that's what I want to impress upon you from UX that might be split out from UI sometimes. People think UI is just about how good it looks. But I want it to, I don't know anything about my UI until I know the information, the content that I'm going to be representing, and what that information knows about itself. So my background is not in design. It is in information science and data structures and data models. And knowing things about like linear regression and algebra, and if you're in games and you're making some sort of like AI or something like that, you've got y equals mx plus b, and you've got a bunch of different data points that you're trying to say, do that one, that kind of one right in there. And that's your AI for whatever NPC, or if I use too many video game terms, somebody stop me. But if you've got some non-player entity in there that's doing something, you need to know about all of those little pieces of data to be able to tell it which one exactly you want to do. And so databases and data structures and just understanding what information knows about itself is the takeaway of this diagram. And so right now, I'm working on a project that is for the National Geographic's Photo Arc. Does anyone know what Photo Arc is? Photo Arc is a project by the photographer Joel Sartori to photograph all animals in captivity. And then it's in collaboration with the IUCN that classifies animals that are endangered. And Joel's database has beautiful images. But the rest of the data that's in there, there's a blob of keywords that is useless, pretty much. There is a string of text that, thank God, is structured in a way that says a polar bear, comma, scientific name, comma, blah, 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 blah. I cannot tell you how lucky it is that that data structure of like a polar bear, comma, scientific name, comma, is consistent throughout all of those images, because now I can pull out the scientific name, which, again, lucky for me, is an actual unique identifier, and cross-reference that to the database of the IUCN, which tells me region, predators, threats, habitats, all kinds of other actually useful information. Now, there is one kind of cool little piece of data that's inside Joel's database with the images. And it's tagged whether or not it's an image with a black background or an image with a white background. And so I can make a choice about some interface colors that are tied directly to that parameter. And so I can say group all of the black images together and all of the white images together. And that way it doesn't look like a checkerboard, which can be a little bit distracting and take your eyes away from focusing on the animals. I can also say when this piece of UI, so I'm going to show you the design for this archive that we're like right in the middle of working on. So imagine these are very beautiful photos of animals, and it's in a little masonry grid right here. If these all have a dark background, I'm going to have some little drop downs right here that will help filter things. And when they so this little element right here, I'm going to make it sticky. So it'll be fixed, it'll be relative. And so as these many different images scroll underneath this item, I could have it so this is solid all the way back in here, and the things just go underneath it. But I'm going to have it transparent, and I'm going to have the parameter of this background color change the background color of what's in here, so it has this really like kind of slick feel to it. And why is a slick feel important to this? Because one of the goals of this design is for Joel to take it to other zoos, show it to them, and they'll be like, oh, okay, it looks like you know what you're doing. You can take photos of all of our animals. And you know, that's part of the goal of this design. And so a little flashiness to it is going to help him, you know, get his buy-in, right? There's a cognitive bias that goes something like, if it looks good, people think it works good. And I guess Apple's been running on that for a long time, but maybe not so much anymore. But sorry, Apple fans. Anyway, yeah, the idea is that there's another goal tied here, and I needed to know information about my content so I could tell my UI to do exactly what I wanted it to do. And that has little to do with going to art school and a lot to do with going to learning about databases. Okay, I think that opens it up. It's 7:30 now. That's right on time, right, James, for Q&A? 7:30?
Yes, but if you want to have a few more things you want to cover, we could shorten the Q&A if you want to finish the topic.
Okay, I'll finish it with this last one about a game that I worked on, that location-based storytelling game. I didn't have a location service that I didn't have one built. You know, I decided I want to make a game and I want it to be based on location. I didn't have a location service, but plenty of APIs out there, and Foursquare had one. And Foursquare's API actually allowed me to understand if a person was there at that location or not, or and was signaling to say, hey, I am here. Let me do something to me or for me or whatever. And so the way that this game worked was that we had a movie. My friends wrote this movie and they wanted a way to distribute it. And so we chopped the movie up into scenes that was like, it was a Western, right? So it was like the chase scene and the bar scene and the deal scene, stuff like that. And so we attached a bunch of venue types from Foursquare's API. Who doesn't know what Foursquare is? Anyone? Okay, cool. Everybody knows what Foursquare is. So we had these venue types, and the venue type could be like gas station or train station. And they bubbled